I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Hello, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 9 of the Relentless Pursuit Podcast, Be, Do, Have.
Did I catch a niner in there?
Episode 9.
All right, Be, Do, Have. I think of Austin Powers, actually, when I think of this, because he's like, oh, behave. So this is
Okay.
Be, Do. This is not close at all, but that's what comes to my mind. Okay, so Be, Do, Have is a phrase that I came across very recently. And it is, it's not a recent phrase. It's been around for a long time. I would say it's like it comes from pop psychology. I couldn't find any like super like deep or like amazing resources that featured this, but you do see it all over. That I would say just your down to earth people, especially people who are trying to explain life to other people. So therapists and positive psychologists and bloggers have really embraced this phrase because of its simplicity. So I liked it as well because it did click with me, and I thought that it would make a great point of conversation to focus on the being versus the doing versus the having, especially as we're at this point in the year near Christmas, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, when, a lot of Christmas becomes about the having, and it really...
And the doing.
Right, this time of year sinks its teeth into our consumeristic culture, so I thought it would be timely.
All right. Well, do you want to get into a little bit more about kind of what this kind of like mantra is about and like how we should be orienting kind of like our time and our focus?
Yes. Because we'll just say like the ideal is that you focus on who you are in that order, and who you are, that's the B, and then on what you do, and then on what you have. But we often reverse it. So, so many times, I think just human nature, and especially like culturally, we focus on what we have and on what we're doing, and then who we actually are underneath all of that really is on the back burner.
Okay. And I've heard it described more like this. Most of us think we need to have a certain thing. So whether it's like more money, more time, more experiences, more education, more love, so that we can do something. So whether that's like pursue a passion, start a business, go on vacation, buy a house, start a family, which will then allow us to be what we want to be. So whether that's happy, fulfilled, complete, so we think we need to have the thing in order to do something, in order to be who we want to be. Mm-hmm. And so you're saying we need to know who we want to be first. And from there stems what we should be doing, and then what we have is a result of those things.
Yes, ideally. And so I think there's a few different ways to picture it. I saw it picture the way that made the most sense to me was if you look at like 3 concentric circles. So like the center circle is B, and then in the next circle around that is do. So it's like what you do, your actions and your behaviors are a natural manifestation of who you are in your core. And then the next circle is what you have. And like what you have is a natural manifestation of what you do, which is naturally stems from who you are. So it kind of makes sense to the extent that if you focus on who you are, then the behaviors, and then we'll call them the possessions, although they can be like a lot of non-tangible things too, are what naturally follows from that. But when we reverse it, when we put the have in the center, then we find ourselves sort of pursuing this like rat race. Maybe it could be consumer driven. Like we want the shiny new toy, the new car, the new iPhone, like whatever's trending really, whatever our neighbor has, or like some of the other things that you listed too. Like there's something I don't currently have that I feel like I lack that I want to pursue. And then it gets reversed. And really we never, even if we think like, if we follow your formula and we say, I finally have the thing that I've been pursuing, So now I can do what it is that I want to do, and then I can be like, we never really even get to the be part, because there's like this, I don't know how you would describe it, like this pit that that only becomes deeper the more we try to fill it with things that we want.
So ultimately, you're saying that like greater happiness and satisfaction, whether it's in your work or in your life, come from being conscious of who you are and what's important to you,
Yeah.
not by what you have.
Right.
And I think so, yeah, I mean, as we're like preparing for the holidays, like, right, a lot of people are talking about like what they need, what they want, what they have, what they don't have.
Well, even
Compared to
those are
what other.
two immensely different things.
Well, that's
like
what I'm saying.
A
So
need
that,
and a want.
well, okay,
Right.
so I'm saying like the have.
Yeah.
But, the difference between being and doing. In season 3, we had talked to Julie Gentile, and she like reminded us just this like small little phrase. She's like that we're human beings and not human doings. And like the norm in our like culture in our society, like in just kind of the modern world, is to be action oriented. So you begin to like base and evaluate who you are based on like how much you get done and what you're achieving. So it's like our
It's
environment
like a way to measure ourselves against other people.
right. So our environment has programmed us to do and not to be. So it's not about like who you say you want to be or who you think you are. It's about like what you do and how much you can accomplish. And so in that way, like who you really are and what you really want gets lost, and you're starting to like kind of reorient everything that you're doing based on what you do or how much you can do. So when you let what you're doing drive your life or what you have drive your life, neither of those things are going to necessarily fulfill you.
So, and those are both external factors.
Right.
And doing is like you can see it. Sometimes you feel productive. You feel like you're working towards some achievement, or you actually get the achievement.
I make a to-do list with the first item on the to-do list already done, just so that I can make the to-do list and already cross one off. Like, that's how bad I can be sometimes.
Yeah,
and I know I'm not the only one.
Is
right?
that a thing?
Oh my gosh, yes, that's the thing. You always like leave me hanging up here like I'm a weirdo. I would like someone to comment on social media today when you're listening that you like to create your list with the first thing already done, so you can already cross it off and feel good about it.
The first thing on my to-do list is to make a to-do list. Check. All right, great. So, like you were saying, like those are external, and it can feel maybe just even a little bit safer to pursue those things because they can be relatively tangible. I suppose it depends what it is, but I think there's a few pitfalls with that too. One thing that struck me is I heard an explanation of be, do, have, and it was, I felt like it was off. So maybe you can correct me or dismantle this, but what they said was start by picturing what it is that you want. And then like some of those wants were like a big house or a big boat, or, insert the great object. And then they said, now work backwards. Now focus on what you need to do to achieve it. And now work backwards. Like focus on who you need to be to do those things to achieve it.
Yeah.
And then I just felt like even that was kind of reversed too, because it's great. I mean, that is kind of like the picture your goal and now work backwards in terms of how you're going to achieve it.
Making a lesson plan, we're doing backward design. What's on the test and how do we get?
Yeah, and
how do we work backwards?
I think there's virtue in that, but at the end of that sequence, I still felt like, at least according to this explanation, that it was a tad shallow in the sense that like you start with
a boat or a car or
not
a
even
house.
that you just but you start with what it is that you want, and then that is the driving force behind all of the decisions that follow. But maybe it's not off. It just depends what it is that you want. Like what do you value? Like if we were to say I want a yacht, it's fine. But if I said
what you want and what you value is different.
But I want like a healthy family. Right. That seems, maybe this is just my bias, but that seems like a little bit more noble than some object that I could save money and purchase.
So, and I think everybody's different. And so for some people, like a boat or a yacht or a summer house, like,
I mean, I want that too.
sure.
Right? Yeah.
But like for some reason, for some people, like that's like something that like defines them, that drives them. That's a want. That's something they want to work towards. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. No, I kind of lost my train of thought. But it's, I think that's just because that's like for so long, like how people were kind of, I don't want to say like programmed, but kind of like taught. Like, right, if you work really hard, you can have this or you can obtain anything. And you just have to put in like the time and the effort to make enough money to get those things, because it was like mostly kind of consumeristic, right? Like that you can put in this many man hours, you can become this kind of thing, and then you can get that end result. But I think, a lot of the things that we talk about are kind of shifting from that mentality. So maybe some people, like from the time they're young, know that even if you're pursuing a career, like maybe that's an end goal, that they want to be a doctor, or they want to be like this, specific person, this kind of career. But what about like for the rest of us that don't really know right away? Right? Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that you can't do anything or you can't have anything because you're not sure what that is? So like, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on an end result, or are we focusing on like finding out like who we are and what makes us happy?
Mm-hmm.
And is it always just going to be like one thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there possibility of a myriad of things that you can try and do and have and be that don't necessarily get you to just one end result?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this too. I mean, you might start with a certain goal in mind, like I want to have X, whatever it is. But I think if I were to focus on who I am, and the more I try to develop my inner character, then what I actually end up having and what I end up actually wanting, like may change. Right? If I'm improving it, like maybe I'll find that what I originally thought I wanted wasn't really as appealing, or it no longer matches the character that I've become.
Right, fulfills, yeah, kind of whatever that kind of ideology is. Well, and I think it's when we're looking at be, do, have, okay? It's not just when we say be what we want, like I think sometimes we limit that to like a career choice or a title or like I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a mother. I want to be right. Like
Actually, I heard this recently. Do you know what the number one thing kids say they want to be now?
Rich?
A YouTuber.
Oh, a YouTube. Well, there you go.
Right.
YouTuber.
It's part of the creator culture.
But it's identifying with like a career or like something very concrete. But like, what is it that we want to be? Do we want to be? I mean, you could say happy, and then we can argue about what happiness truly is, and if it's a choice and whatever, or fulfilled, or generous, or inspired, or creative. Like, what are we filling in that blank with what we want to be?
Yeah, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be honest. I want to have integrity.
Right, but people don't.
Well, we say people, me and you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we wouldn't say that either. So that like maybe that's the ideology is like when we're going through this mantra, be, do, have. It's not about like necessarily like what we're doing in terms of achievement or what we have in terms of possessions. Like, how do we reframe these questions in a bigger picture to lead a fulfilled life, to pursue things that are noble and good and true, and that help inspire people, and that help create good things, and that help other people, and that it's not just about us, and it's not just about what we end up with.
Yeah.
But this also kind of stems back to the conversation we had last week about margin, right? Like, yeah, you have margin in your life to have space, not just to like relax and read a book, but you have time in your life set aside to reflect on what's going on what you're working on what you're doing, on what you have. Do you have time and space in your life to ask yourself, like, am I doing this right? Is what I'm doing worth it? Am I seeing the payout? Does this help me be who I say I want to be? Or does this help us as a family be who we say we want to be? If you don't have that time and space to ask yourself those questions or to see if those things are in alignment, then you're kind of just doing the things to have the stuff.
Yeah. So I have a few questions and thoughts that stem from that. I think so I'll get slightly literary and philosophical for a moment, but I think of Thomas Jefferson. And a lot of his writings and a lot of people in his era thought similarly. So, like during the Enlightenment era, he's one of the American icons of that era. But he often just wrote about character development. And so there's a famous letter. Actually, I have it. Do you know I have one of these books is a book of Jefferson's letters?
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so it's in there somewhere. But he writes this letter, and he really is talking about how to live a good life. And the whole first section of this letter is all about focusing on character. Like, make yourself a good person. Nothing else matters unless you are an upright person. He talks about honesty and integrity. But interwoven with that is the notion that that's something that can be developed, something that has to be worked on in a sense. And then after that, he talks about developing your mind, with education. And I think both of those are interrelated, and because I think your attitudes and your character and your beliefs and your education, those are all part of who you are, of the B. But then you move forward in American literature, a generation or two, and you get to the romantic writers, you get to Emerson, and a lot of it is not about I need to develop myself. It's about who I am, just out of the box, is sufficient. I'm a beautiful creature, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing pretty strongly, but I think really what we're going for is a combination of those two things. One is just understanding who we are and accepting that and loving that. Emerson said, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. So I think Trish Blackwell was saying this when we interviewed her in episode 5 this season, just about kind of having this intrinsic value of who we are. But then I think you add that Jeffersonian element to it too, where you also continue to reflect on and gird your character. And once you have that foundation, then beautiful behaviors are naturally going to stem from those attitudes and those dispositions you've given yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're in tune with who you are, right? Just naturally who you are, and even what your interests are, and just just the things that you're drawn to, and then you have, I don't want to say a planner, but you figure out who, what you want to be more like the best of you. How do I help cultivate some of those things, and even the things that aren't great, how do I help someone coach me along in those areas so I can become better? If you're working on that, then the things that you want to do should really stem from that. If you're really in tune with, being who you say you want to be. And then really, I think sometimes the point that you're getting at with the have here is then the things that you have or the things that you want to have change. That they're not always just these superficial things. And it's fine to have those things. It's nice to have new cars and houses and vacations and epoxied garage floors and what, you can still have those things, but is that the sole basis of your life? And those things aren't innately going to make you happy. Having those things aren't going to make you any happier. You could have a new car, but it might not make you any happier if you're not in sync with your values and your beliefs, and what you're doing is not in line with that as well.
Yeah. So I did get hung up, and I want your input because I had a hard time separating the be from the do. And I think I was hung up on this when we were talking to Trish Blackwell earlier too, because she was talking about confidence, and I just thought confidence is manifested in how you act in the world, through some task or some action. And then she backed us up a little bit and was no, it's kind of this innate state of being. So how would you describe the relationship between who you are and then what you do? Because in my mind, I can't really separate the two. So who I am can only be manifested through my actions, right? I don't know. How would you describe that?
I don't know that I have the answer to that. I mean, I think
how do you be something?
Well, would you say you're a good person?
I keep asking myself that. I hope so.
Right, but do you ever do things that a good person wouldn't do?
Of course.
Are you selfish? Do you always put others first? Like, right? So it's like there is a difference in who you say you are, who you want to be, and sometimes what you do. And what you do isn't necessarily always who you are, or vice versa. So I think it's really watching those two things that it's kept in check. Like, what are you actually doing?
Well, right. That's why I'm saying, like, I want to, like, all right, I'll just say I want to be a good person, right? I want to be responsible, conscientious, caring. Then, even if I'm trying to be those things internally, the only way I feel like I can measure it is then by, I guess what you're saying is like you have to like check what your actions are, then compare it to
Right.
how you're
One of your
describing
goals,
yourself.
kind of your resolutions for this year, was to be more generous. So, right, that's what you say you want to be a more generous person. And so that we were going to increase our like generosity through like donating and giving. So, like at the end of the year, we'll go through like, how did we do? Like we said, we wanted to be more generous. Were we more generous than the year before? We were. Where did we fall short? So it's kind of like, okay, so what did you do to prove that that's who you are? And then like, did you knock it out of the park? Nobody ever knocks it out of the park, but are you in tune with the fact? Like, how far did you get? And what did you do and how did you do it? And where are you still falling short? So if you really want to be that generous person, what is it going to take to do even better the next time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, part of it is trial and error, and part of it is figuring it out. And it's like practicing. Our kids are in basketball right now, and it's like, you can't just practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7, right? There's got to be this consistent practice and doing on the other days of the week. And I think that's what it's like as an adult.
Yeah.
Right? I want to
I
be a
would
good
even
dad.
say-
What does that look like? Being a good dad isn't always saying yes. And in what ways do you say no to show up as a good father?
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think that like sometimes like maybe the doing trumps the being to some extent too. So let's say I want to be more generous. Well, okay, well, it's time to, donate again this month or whatever. And like my heart might not be in it, but if I still do it, right? Like doesn't that speak to, like, even if I were to give charitably,
Right. Some people make like,
begrudgingly, isn't that better than feeling generous but not giving, right?
well, there's like a saying for that, right? Like sometimes you do it. Like it's almost like, it's like a painful practice where you just have to do it. It's like muscle memory. It's like anything. It's like getting up early to work out, or it's like eating healthy. It's like sometimes you just don't want to do it, but like it becomes a habit, and a habit becomes a routine, and a routine becomes who you are. So when we were talking about atomic habits, we did that at the beginning of the year last year in January. So it's like sometimes you have to, in order to be that person, you have to do the things to get you to be the person. Like, so, I mean, I think you're right. There's like this codependent relationship where sometimes you have to do the behaviors in order to become what it is you say you want to become.
I wrote a verse a while back that I think tried to capture that feeling. I'm trying to remember.
Is that
how
in
it
a
was.
Dirty Thanksgiving poem, or was this in a
No, this was
more
in
altruistic poem you wrote?
a clean poem.
Okay.
I think it ended with, if man cannot his heart control, then no less am I than what I was. For man commands what guides his soul and names his love by what he does. I think that's how it went, which was me trying and kind of fumbling to say, like, it doesn't matter how my heart feels towards, like, I don't want to make the bed in the morning, but I do anyway.
Oh my, that's your example. You made this beautiful verse, and
Well, it could still be.
it's making the bed in the morning, but I do it because highly successful people make their bed every morning.
But it could be. It talks about almost like the commitment and the discipline to do something, and that I think maybe it's almost like fake it till you make it. Like it is sort of like reverses. Like if you smile, then you'll feel happy. So I know we're getting hung up on like the being and the doing, but that was one aspect I just wanted to talk through with you because I feel like there's a relationship there. And it's distinct from the having portion.
Well, and if you're looking at be, do, have, I think that there's a connection there. But I think when people get caught up in not, when you're talking about the concentric circles where the be is in the middle, the do is on the outside, and then the have is like further on the outside than that, is that we don't get caught up in like the more I do, the more there is to do. That like mentality of like, I just have to get stuff done because that will then, get me to have what I want. Or I got to get stuff done because that proves who I am or who I think I'm supposed to be. So it's not just like doing for the sake of doing or doing more. Is what you're doing in line with who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see what you have after that.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll have a better attitude. Maybe you'll have a more generous heart. Like maybe it's not about the thing that you get from it, but maybe it's like what you learn after it.
Yeah. So that's a big question too. Like, who do I want to be?
Well, and
it's like in Zoolander. Like, who am I? I don't know.
right. Well, who do I want to be and what do I actually want?
What do I actually want?
I'm the worst. I think we had like a little, I don't want to say it was like a fight about it, but like.
Oh, no, I want to use my word. It was a bit of a scrum.
A scrum. We had a scrum over it. I was like kind of in a funk. That's what I call it, for like a weekend. And like you asked me like, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't even know what I want. I basically want you to know what I want. And then I want you to tell me what I want.
The Notebook and Ryan Gosling's like, what do you want? What do you want? She's like, I don't know.
That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah.
But it's, again, are we taking time in our life in the margin to know what we actually want? Or to figure out who we actually want to be. We've talked about like me being at home for a long time and feeling like I couldn't kind of step out of that role and do something else. And even like when you're saying, if you want to do this, you can do this. And I'm like, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. I can't do this because that's not who I want to be. And it's like, but that's okay if that's who you want to be. Then you just have to like reorient and shift what you're doing to have what you want. But ultimately it goes back to what do you want to be? Mm-hmm. And being whoever that is, that's the most important part. Is that what's going to fulfill you?
Yeah.
Not what I'm going to get as a result of being that, So.
So maybe as we're approaching 2022 and some of us are starting to forge our goals and our vision for that, like maybe that is in itself a goal and worthy of an entire year's focus is just that being part. Like, who am I? What do I actually want before I'm starting to like put actions to it, and certainly before I'm trying to have, like, just focusing on that internal element. Who do I actually want to be? Making those decisions, and then reminding yourself, like, I want to be honest. And the moment you go to be dishonest, like, nope, shoot, like I told myself I want to be honest, and that means in this moment I need to be that way.
Yeah, and when I think about some of the goals I made for like this past year. They were all like kind of like action-oriented goals, like something I was going to do or something I was going to achieve. And the year before that and 2 years before that, a lot of the goals had to do with like some of these like more overarching like themes for my life, like wanting like peace or like wanting, for some people it's stability or like, so what are you changing in your life for those outcomes to happen? So, if you're thinking about the new year and what you want for 2022 and what's ahead, like maybe it isn't about, how many books you read or how many miles you run, something that you can do and check off a list, so that you can get something out of it, or prove something to yourself. But, maybe it has more to do with the kind of person you want to be or the kind of life you want to live.
You used to watch a show. I don't remember the name of it. You'll remember it, but I'm going to butcher the theme song. What's it like? How'd it go? I don't want to be anything other than
what I've been trying to be lately. Yeah, One Tree Hill when I was like 23 years old. Yes, long time ago when I used to watch
that lyric.
TV.
May ring true for some of us.
So I think there's just one more thing that I think we should kind of talk about when we're talking about this topic. Lot to kind of digest and a lot for listeners to consider. But what does this conversation mean for our kids? How can we apply it to them? Like we can always just think about ourselves, but a lot of people who listen, have kids, like what?
Just the next generation, right? Even if
that
you don't necessarily have kids on your own. So like we're saying, it's very human to focus on the have, and it's very just cultural, and especially at this time of year, to focus on the have. So how do we help our own kids focus on who they are?
Yeah. And, this is what comes up. I saw a post, it was like a few weeks ago. So when you brought up that you wanted to talk about be, do, have, I was like, this reminds me of a post I saw that said like, how often do we ask our kids what they want to do when they grow up? or like who they want to be, but only in terms of like a career, like a doctor, a lawyer, a ballerina, whatever it is,
YouTuber.
a YouTuber, and not like who they want to be. Like in terms of like, I want to be happy, creative, fulfill. I like what words are we not putting in there that it's tied to like a career, it's tied to what they want to do, and it's not about like who they are as a person.
Right.
I want to be truthful. I want to be honest. I want to be generous. I want to be loving.
My first answer to your question is that just sounds really lame. And I'm not joking, but it sounds silly to be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, oh, well, I want to be honest. Like, okay, great, but what's,
because we're doers. Because
right?
It's like,
what are you
what
gonna
are
be
we
doing
going to
with
achieve?
yourself?
What are we going to achieve? And how much money are we going to make? And can you support yourself? Because you're not living here.
While
like
you're walking around with all this integrity, how does that, how are
how
you going
many
to support
dollars
your
worth?
family?
Yeah. How does that work? But it makes me kind of like think back to like, people who we grew up with who are just like very like artsy and kind of out there and not choosing like a path or a role or a career, like just didn't appeal to them. But I also remember feeling very pressured to be like, okay, you're 18, now choose your college, now choose your career, and thinking like, and really what I wanted to be was like, I wanted to be like a writer for like a magazine, like write newspaper articles, like something like that kind of appealed to me. I was like, I don't know what that looks like. Like that wasn't like concrete enough for me. And it seemed kind of like a little bit out there. And it wasn't like, it didn't have like a very, like you go to school for 4 years and then you get a job. It's like you get a job and it's
first major communications.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Something pretty crappy. It wouldn't make a lot of money. And I was like, no, I can't do that. Yeah. So then like I switched, and it's like, if you look at
that's still like do oriented, right?
It's very do oriented. It wasn't about like what I really wanted to be, or like what was most fulfilling to me. It was more like, I need to do this, to like to check the boxes, to achieve, to have a degree, to find a husband, to get married. Like it was like this very like rigid checklist. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the trend kind of amongst millennials, I don't know if you've noticed this, that we aren't staying in the same careers and industries that we went to college for. And maybe that will be even more relevant for our kids. Like, will our kids need to think about work as a lifelong career that defines them or keeps them trapped in like a certain role? Or is it going to be more fluid in these next generations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now they call it the Great Resignation, right? Because there's a high volume of fluidity to people who are resigning their current position and trying something new. But I think about like just the idea of personal responsibility. Like I'll go back to the make your bed example, and I don't think that's a character trait, but like it reflects the trait of like just basic responsibility. It's kind of the equivalent of returning when you have the shopping cart, and like, do you actually return it to the corral? There's like,
yes.
Well, you do. Not everyone does, though. I mean, how often do you go into a parking lot and you just see some lone shopping cart shoved in some awkward spot? And that affects other people, but making your bed, I guess, doesn't really affect anyone except you. There's really no reason to make a bed
that you're going to get back into.
You're going to get back into it, right? The only reason is because it like makes your room look nice. It keeps you from climbing back into it, maybe. But there is sort of this fundamental conscientiousness and there's a whole book. I think it's written by like an ex-Marine or a veteran, kind of that talks about like the title of it is "Make Your Bed," and it goes off of this idea that kind of action shows a degree of conscientiousness that then manifests in other more meaningful ways as well. Like you're going to make your bed, and when you're done eating, you're going to like wash your dish, and like just kind of this idea of putting everything in its place, not letting the items in your life or the to-do list in your life just run you or to run amok, but that you attend to the task at hand when it needs to be done. And then if you're doing that for something as basic as making your bed, then you're going to do it for something like a class project when you're a kid, or a job or other responsibilities that you have too.
Well, and that makes me think of parenting a little bit, since we're kind of talking about kids and and about, who they want to be or who they should be. It's kind of like that with parenting, if you think about it. Like, right, our role is to kind of like mold these kids, and it's to like to get them to be self-sufficient and, right, to put their dirty dishes in the dishwasher and to put their clothes in the hamper and to, put away their clean socks and those types of things. And when they leave this house someday, right, hopefully they're going to take all of that with them, and it's going to allow them to be like responsible and competent and take care of their own belongings. But do we focus so much on like teaching them those tasks and making them be responsible? Like, are they going to remember those things? Yes, because they're going to learn how to do those things. But what will being a parent to them mean and look like? Are they going to remember like the soft warm moments of like wanting to snuggle on the couch, or like the joy in the house around Christmas time when we decorated? Like what do we want them to remember about their parents when they're adults? You know what I mean? Where it's like those softer things. Like, oh sure, yeah, my parents did this and they made me do my homework or whatever. But it's like that feeling of like being home. What does a home feel like?
That's nice.
I was getting soft and sappy. You didn't really like it.
But I feel like that's part of it. But I mean, you can snuggle all you want. I don't know if that impacts your character necessarily. Like it's almost in a different direction, where it's like it makes home feel like home, where you're nurtured and cared for and loved and seen. I think that's important. But at the same time, it's like, sure, don't sit next to me. You didn't make your bed yet, right? Or you're going to take out that toy. You want to play a game with me? I put away the toy that you were just playing with.
I'm just saying.
I don't mean to sound cold, but like,
I'm just saying, like, what example, like, that you can be productive and you can teach your kids to do things and do them the right way. But what else do they?
But it doesn't need to be boot camp all the time either. Is what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, like, when they get married someday, I want to have a relationship like my parents had, like something that like. That's what I want. Like I want to find a loving wife. Like what do I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a great husband, like my dad was to my mom. Like things that they can see, like that it's not always that your aspirations have to be tied to your career or to your work. Mm-hmm. That asking kids what they want to be leads them to have to claim like a career and identity that they might never earn or even want to earn. Mm-hmm. That it's there are bigger things. Yeah. Right. I want to be generous like my grandparents were. I want, like, there's things that you have said, like I want to be.
So they see the character in you in addition to the things that you're kind of making them do.
Yeah. What'd your dad do? I don't know. He did something in an office somewhere. He did some business stuff. Like it doesn't really matter what he did. It matters who he was. Yeah. And I want to be like that.
But did he make his bed? Yeah. But I think those things are important. So like going back to it is like if you are teaching our kids like some of those fundamental responsibilities, and I'll just use responsibility and conscientiousness as one aspect of who they are. There's others that I think you're referring to, but I think like you start with those small like childlike things, like putting your toys away, because then if you can do that, then at some point you're going to build upon that foundation and then be able to take care of a kid on your own too, right? If you can make your bed, then you can raise a kid. Not in the same day, but if you have the conscientiousness to attend to like the basic fundamental responsibilities of your daily living, then you're going to have that foundation upon which you can do more significant things like raising your own child.
I'm just also saying that we don't have to be defined by our career. Like my mom was a kick-ass lawyer, but she also like through the neighborhood's best black party, or like, that it's not just about what you do or what you have. It's about who you are. Mm-hmm. And so like maybe part of who you are is drawing people together, and maybe that's a great thing. And it doesn't have to be in your career. Yeah. It can be who you are as a person and how you bring people together in the world outside of that. Yeah. That's all. So that have, that it's a flux and it's a flow, but the most important thing is like who you are at the center.
Yeah. So it's almost like we were saying, for an upcoming year, like some of us may choose to like focus on that being part. We could also maybe make that list and really meditate on that for our children as well. And if they're old enough, like include them in that conversation and in that process. Like who do you really want to be? And then I could see this as being an easy gotcha. Like, oh, said you wanted to be a healthy person, but it's your second time you asked for candy today. Right. Probably be tempted to like throw it back at them at some point. Or maybe you and I can throw it back at each other too, in a loving, accountable kind of way. But I think that could be useful just to kind of go back to that core of, all right, here's who I think I am, or who I aspire to be. Let me just work on that. Let me surround myself with the people and the resources. Like I think of the authors or the voices, like the other entities that help reinforce that state of being, and then like that. I think that's at the core. What we're saying is that once those are in place, then everything, the doing and then the having, comes naturally.
And yeah, and it's healthy, and it's prosperous, and not prosperous always necessarily financially, but like what stems from that is good.
Yeah.
And you're putting more good out there.
Yeah.
Which we could all use a little more good out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with children it's trickier though, because as adults we can take responsibility for ourselves, and we just have way more control over ourselves and our environment. With children, a lot of the way they perceive the world is like through our experience and through the relationship that we have with them too. So I think it's just to enhance our parenting, we almost need to think about like in what ways are we like manifesting our humanity and the best, maybe the worst parts of ourselves to them.
It's a deep thought. A lot to reflect on.
I read an article in, I think it was Psychology Today. Don't quote me on that though, but it talked about how children who were more resilient during 2020 pandemic environment were often that way because it wasn't because their parents were resilient, but they said like parents who, even if the parents experienced anxiety or depression or other like negative or trauma,
financial
or like
hardship,
attributes, that those things were like the parent still like in their interactions with their child still demonstrated, I'll just call it adultness. That's not what the article said, but they still were like the loving, stable family member for that child in front of them. Now behind a closed door, they might have been breaking down, but I thought that was interesting just because that just made me think about the extent of kind of vibe that children get from their parents. And like a child is able to be more resilient because of the way they saw their parent respond to a challenging circumstance. So I think about, just in context of this conversation, right? How do we present ourselves to our child and interact with them and let them lead play and have non-electronic based interactions with them, and like what are the things that we're doing that we invite them to partner with us on. There's so much there.
Yeah, it goes back to a lot of what we've talked about all season. It just kind of weaves it all together.
Yeah.
All right, time to wrap it up.
Sure. I feel like there's a lot more to say. I think sometimes our listeners think like, man, it's just getting good, but that's where we cut it off. I don't want to say intentionally, but now you take it from here, dear listeners.
Well, we did recently have a review from someone who had started listening, and I think they said they started listening like with season 4. They said some of these conversations are so good, but it seems like you need to have like 2 parts, or that like that there's more to the conversation. And a lot of times when we shut this off, we talk more about these topics. We just cut it short.
Ongoing conversations.
But again, it's for you guys just to get your minds rolling, to maybe even come up with some like what you think and what you feel about this. Share it with a friend, share it with your partner, talk to your husband about it. That's part of what it's all about, getting us to kind of think a little bit more deeply, and kind of live this life a little bit more on purpose.
Yeah. I don't know if we've overtly said this, but we do try to keep our conversations 30 to 40 minutes. We're probably past that for this conversation
I've
now.
given you the wrap up signal like 3 times.
Okay. All right. Well, well, like Rosanna said, go ahead and share this conversation with anyone that you feel might benefit from it, and kind of keep in tune with us too. If this inspires you to create any specific goals for 2022, or you have another thought about yourself or about parenting that would be relevant, we would really invite you to share. And as always, head over to iTunes, 5 stars, glowing review. You know the drill. Make it happen. We love you, everybody, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you are encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are 2 great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.